Pat, over to you.
Thank you, Benny. I'd like to begin with a quote. It's important to recognize the limits of science to solve fundamentally political questions. The challenges of wicked problems and the need for post-normal science call for science advice processes to be transparent and inclusive, as open and participatory beyond the scientific and political elites as possible, multidisciplinary, independent, and conducted with integrity. Scientific independence and integrity should be safeguarded from political interference, and scientists should act as honest brokers rather than issue advocates. Now, these words could have been written by Greenpeace, by Friends of the Earth, by Via Campesina, or even my own organization, but they come from a 2022 Joint Research Council report on the interplay between policy making and scientific research and the multiple limitations of so-called science-based policy. Science is, of course, important, but genetic engineering is not just a scientific issue. It is an ethical, environmental, social, economic, legal, and cultural issue. Creating regulation or indeed deregulation without giving equal weight to these concerns and the diverse risks that they represent is a procedural, policy, and political failure. In England, we have embraced this kind of failure. Abandoning foresight, transparency, and precaution, we have begun to implement some of the most liberal deregulation of NGTs in the world, with a view to eventually deregulating all GMOs in UK food and farming. And we have done this by making up names for things and inventing random and poorly defined categories and criteria that exempt certain GMOs from risk assessment, labeling, and traceability. Our new legislation is not yet fully operational, and we are watching the EU, rather like our colleagues from Norway, for its next steps, because the EU is a global regulatory power that is traditionally aspired to lead. Thanks to the so-called Brussels effect, the EU has set global benchmarks in rational, precautionary regulations around food standards, around online safety, around environmental protection, just to name a few. So it is beyond perplexing right now that the EU chooses to follow rather than lead, and worse, to follow the advice of issue advocate scientists. Equally perplexing, given the need to protect our environment and our food system, and the endless rhetoric about sustainability and food security, is its willingness to place its faith in a scientific process that is demonstrably incomplete, inconclusive, and uncertain. We are now in an Oppenheimer moment, contemplating dropping a bomb on our food system and on nature, with little regard for consequences, and justifying this with deficient science, disregard for ethics and environment, and nationalistic rhetoric about being innovators and winners. It's not too late to amend these proposals, and it is in the interest of all European citizens and citizens elsewhere to do so. Now, my fellow panelists have detailed, I think, quite fully the inadequate science and the empty promises underpinning these draft NGT proposals. Let me, a mouthy foreigner, be more blunt. Do not drop this bomb. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this advice, Pat.